This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm doing great. Happy New Year, buddy.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
2023 was a great year for the podcast, but I did want to point out December was a banner month.
It sure was. It goes against every single historical marker or trend, but we literally had our best month ever, and not even close, in the month of December. So we definitely ended 23 on a high note. So it sets the bar that much higher for us this year.
That's good. I mean, every year's been better than the year previous, and I mean, really all the credit goes to our listeners, right? I mean, we can't, there's nothing about these statistics that are because of things we're doing, right? It's the people that are listening and energizing us to keep doing the show.
And sharing the show with others. It's amazing how people talk to us like, oh, I didn't know that thing existed. Yep, here we are doing our thing 4.5 years later, still figuring it out.
And behind the curtains here, right, we always record the show a few days early. So today's our first day back to work. It's always hard the first day back from work, isn't it, after you have a long vacation?
Yeah, I don't remember what identity and access management is. I'm like trying to figure it out. I'm like, what is it? What's my job? What do I do here? What do I even know? Yeah, I was
exactly
in a fog for the last week or so.
Now, another behind the scenes is that we recorded the next episode in December, right? It was with Phil Windley. He wrote a book called Learning Digital Identity. It's an awesome book. Big fanboy. And he turned around and gave us 5 codes that people can use, our listeners can use for downloading an ebook version of the book. And so there's only 5 of them, right? So we have to come up with a good way to give them away. And what we came up with is that now we've got this cool new voicemail functionality that we've been thinking, how do we get people to call up to the voicemail and leave a message with a question that we can then take that question and play it on an episode and then answer it. So what we came up with is we'll take 5 of the questions that people leave on the voicemail and we'll use those during an episode that will drop on February 5th. And so given that, why don't you tell people how to leave the voicemail? Because I don't think that part is abundantly clear yet.
Okay, so this is relatively new. I added this to the site in December, I think. Maybe it was November. If you go to the website, idacpodcast.com, right on the homepage, you're going to see a little flyer that comes out from the right. It says, talk to us. You just click that, and you'll see a little microphone check, and you just start talking, and it will send your voice message over to Jim and myself. The other way you can get to it is if you go to the contact page on our website, idacpodcast.com, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen there as well a talk to us kind of section. Same idea. Send us a question, a comment, a concern, how you want to be cooked, if you're a potato or prepared as a potato, whatever it is. We'll pick the 5 that we like the best and use them on the show. So you'll want to listen to that episode, and we'll hopefully have some good entrants as we go through that. But that's how you do it. Just go to the website, click the Talk to Us banner on the right-hand side, and there you go.
Yeah, and I would say that, obviously we have the book contest right now, but that voicemail feature is always available, and I think if we get good questions, we'll keep doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's always fun to answer kind of live questions, and you can drop them all over into LinkedIn, but if we can play it out of the audio on the show, even better. We've tried this in the past, didn't really have a lot of uptake, but we'll see if this new version is easier for people to use, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, fantastic. So what's today's episode about?
We're going to talk about Chrysalis 4, and this is a conference that's coming up in the next couple of weeks here. And to help us with that conversation, I want to welcome back Gary Rowe. He's the CEO and founder of TechVision Research. He's also the former president at Burton Group, former co-president of Gartner for Technical Professionals, or GTP for people in the know. He's also been on the show with us, which is why I said welcome back. He was with us in episode 174. This is episode 253. Last time we talked was Chrysalis 2022. That was October of 22. Welcome back to the show, Gary.
Well, thanks. And great to be on again. I loved it a year or so ago when we were on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to join you guys again.
Well, thanks for taking the time with us. And I'm going to point people back to episode 174. Normally, our first question is, how did you get into World of Identity? You've already answered that, so we're not going to put you through that again. Go back, listen to episode 174 if you want to know Gary's origin story. We talked about Chrysalis last time. We're talking about Chrysalis again. I guess, tell me a little bit about the conference itself. What is it? And what is the sort of overarching goal that we're trying to get out of it this year?
So the conference is an end-user focused, large enterprise conference that takes a hard, pragmatic look at identity, security, governance, and privacy, and looks at recommendations for large organizations, where we believe the industry should be going. And it provides a bit of a platform for large enterprises that are trying to make architecture planning decisions going forward.
Yeah, and you've got kind of a who's who list, and we've got some questions to kind of see that coming up. But, right off the bat, just so people know, when is the conference, where is it, and how much does it cost?
So the conference is January 16th to 17th. It is a virtual event, so everybody anywhere can participate. It costs $399, but we are offering a 50% discount to those that follow you guys. And I believe the code is IDAC24. And if you put that in when you register, you get 50% off the attendance fee.
Yeah, listening to the podcast has its privileges, right? But Gary, who's the conference for? Is it for people who've been in the industry for 20 years plus?
It is for decision makers, architects, certainly experienced people, but also folks that are really trying to understand this in a very concentrated fashion, primarily focused on large organizations that are trying to figure this out. How does identity support some of your security goals? How does that tie in with your governance models? What's the impact of new technologies that are being introduced? So there's a set of recommendations and perspectives specifically for large enterprises.
So first of all, I don't want to gloss over the code because that's very cool. Thank you for the code. IDAC24 gets you $200 off. Nothing to sneeze at for sure. Membership has its privileges, I guess, if you're part of the IDAC crew, right? And by crew, I mean listening audience. It's virtual, I guess, if for people who can't attend, and I'll be honest, I can't attend because I'm actually going to be on flights and traveling those days. Is there something that I can do to kind of catch up after the fact? What's the virtual environment look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody who registers for the conference will also, after the fact, have access to all of the videos from the event. So you can do it in real time, or if there are certain sessions you say can't attend, you can review them afterwards.
So Gary, I was looking at the agenda, and I mean, these topics, they are sucking me in. I can't wait to attend, and I'm not sure if I can attend all of these topics, or if you have to pick and choose. Maybe you can talk us through that. But the first one that caught my eye was modernization. You want to talk a little bit about the modernization theme?
Sure. So one of the first sessions we have is this next generation identity and access management foundation. And as an analyst firm, we've spent a lot of time tracking, wrote a lot of research, worked with a lot of clients on the consulting side with this phenomenon that we're seeing now, which is a lot of the big vendors are taking, classic identity and access management, identity governance and administration, privileged access management, and other capabilities and trying to build them into one cohesive platform. So large enterprises are at a decision point now. Do we stick with, our preferred PAM and IGA and IAM solution, or do we look to one of these consolidated platform solutions? So we'll have a session that will dive into this and look at some of the pros and cons, and assess where Microsoft Entra is, and where Okta is with their expansion, and where CyberArk is, and where the Thoma Bravo contingent of companies, where they are and how they may fit in terms of the capabilities that they're offering and the time frame that they're offering, as opposed to other standalone solutions. So that's a real important area that, frankly, almost every one of our clients is trying to figure out now. So that's a key early session at Chrysalis this year.
So I hear next gen thrown around quite a bit. I guess help me understand, what does next gen even mean? Because I think we need to decide as an industry, what does that term even mean? Because it could mean modernization, it could mean convergence, right? You talked a little bit about like platforms kind of coming together, right? Things like that. There's certainly the AI thing sitting out in the corner that is staring at us. Define next gen. Like, what does it mean to you?
Wow, you're really nailing me. The advantage of at least partly writing for a living is you have a little flexibility when you use terms like that. You're not going to let me do that. So next gen to me is, when you think about identity, any large organization, remember that's what we're focused on. So any large organization, if you're going to make substantive changes, an organization's ability to actually execute on those changes, typically years. So we have to be looking forward in terms of, where these technologies are going, where the vendors are going, where the market is going, because, if you're planning on kind of best of breed today, by the time it's fully implemented and deployed and executed and integrated into your applications, it may be several years down the road. So by next generation, it's this kind of forward-looking perspective. It's trying to put the right stakes in the ground in a reasonable time frame. It's usually a year or two.
What are the kind of folks that you get in these sessions? Is it mostly panels or is it presenters? And then I'm also wondering, like, is this going to be the conference where, like, quote unquote, news breaks, that something gets said that you're like, wow, I've actually never heard that before. This is new information. You brought up the Thoma Bravo piece, and I saw that you have Andre at the conference. Like, are you like expecting or at least hopeful that there's going to be some news that drops?
I'm absolutely hopeful. I never fully expect, but the focus is on trying to solve some of these problems and trying to, as an industry, really work through what are the right directions for organizations to take. Most of the sessions will be panel sessions. So, if you look at the panels and you look at, some of the just deep thinkers and folks that really have driven our industry that are on those panels, I'm very hopeful that we will come up with some new things. We will come up with some better solutions. We'll work through some of these, challenges, as a group, and always focusing on, what is best for large enterprises.
Yeah, one of the things I think is, like, if you get those panels and not everybody agrees, that's where, not that you want to have like a Jerry Springer or anything, right? We're not going to get that in an identity conference. But if there's a little bit of difference of opinion, maybe, hey, some folks are coming from the perspective of the practitioner. Other folks are coming from the product perspective. But I thought really what could be interesting about the modernization is you really see a tidal wave of new technology, not only in our space, but in all the other IT spaces. It kind of feels like digital identity has a job unto itself just to keep up with the fast pace of what's happening, in the cloud and enterprise IT in general. So I'm really, like I said, really interested in that modernization track. Jeff touched on convergence, and the other theme that really jumped out at me was artificial intelligence. And it wouldn't be an episode of Identity at the Center or Artificial Intelligence at the Center if we didn't bring this up. So, this is a big theme, right? This is pervasive beyond IT, right? This is like, people are talking about this at the bar over a couple of beers. How's it going to affect, or how does that theme fit into Chrysalis?
So it fits in a couple of ways. Like I mentioned earlier, in almost every session, we're going to have a lot of really smart people discussing and debating these things, answering questions, trying to pontificate about where things should be going. In almost every session, I think it would look naive, it would almost be impossible not to be looking at artificial intelligence and generative AI and big data and how decisions are made and so forth. So that'll be infused into virtually every session on identity and security and governance. We also have a separate panel discussion that looks at the impact of artificial intelligence, and as we all know, good and bad, as it applies to security, as it applies to identity and governance. And like on that panel, we'll have a lady I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with over the years, Barbara Starr, who's one of the top artificial intelligence people in the world. She did a lot of the DARPA work over the last 20 years that developed a lot of the foundation that ended up, resulting in Siri and a lot of the, AI technologies we kind of take for granted at this point. She's also done a lot of security work. We'll also have in this particular session, Diana Kelly, who I'm sure you guys know and have worked with, over a period of time. She's not only a security expert, she's doing a lot of work in artificial intelligence and security now. We also have Chris Wolf, who I had the pleasure to work with at Burton Group a long time ago, but Chris now runs AI at VMware. So we'll have that perspective. And then another former colleague of mine, it's the advantage of being pretty old and having been in the industry a long time, almost everyone I've worked with at some point, but we'll have Nick Nichols on that panel, who runs the security area at OpenText now, and identity is within that. But has done a lot of innovative work, and we'll have another perspective on artificial intelligence and generative AI and how that kind of fits into this model. So, we'll have a great team. We'll dive into this deeply. I want to make sure when we look at AI, though, that we look at it with the proper perspective. It's not going to solve all problems. And artificial intelligence and machine learning in general, it's sometimes wrong. And, if we want to make very prescriptive decisions solely based on, AI and machine learning generated data, we need to be careful. So we need to be thinking of the governance and so forth, around that.
Yeah, I think AI is one of those battlegrounds where it's going to become a differentiator for a lot of organizations. And who is the best AI in quotation marks? And I think that's one of the attacks that we're starting to see even early on is poisoning the models that are being used to generate that kind of stuff. I want to take it down a level, though, because that's super serious stuff. Tell me about Gary, the writer, who does this for a living. How do you see AI? Do you see it helping you, write your research, write blogs, articles, things like that? Is it cheating? And I ask because I use it quite a bit. I'm a big fan of it, but I certainly recognize the challenge around it. But I'm always curious to people who actually write for a living. How do they view AI in the context of, what you do for a living?
I think it can be extremely helpful and useful. I haven't personally leveraged it that much in terms of my writing yet. I've used it for some primary research, but then I'll pick an example, an area that I've covered for the last 6-7 years is the area of verifiable credentials and decentralized identity. And when you do some chat GPT requests in that area, it gives you a lot of older data. And, so for things that are moving really quickly and there's lots of changes, that will improve over time, of course. But, so for certain things, it's not quite as useful. But for some general research, if you're trying to get up to speed on a new topic, I think that's really important. And, there is an opportunity for analysts, for writers, to basically get a level set pretty quickly, especially if it's something new that you're trying to research and understand, and then kind of interpret that data and, make your decision, as an analyst as to what really is correct and what might need some additional research.
Kind of strikes me of like when I was growing up, Pluto was a planet. And then it wasn't. So for the longest time, I was like, oh, well, Pluto is a planet, that's what it is. And then the facts changed. It no longer is a planet. And I don't know, is it a planet again? I think there's some movement, I think, to move it back. But it strikes me as that same kind of data model that you talked about where it maybe doesn't know recent things. Like you said, that'll get better over time, right? It becomes more real time, that kind of thing. But I think that's kind of a cautionary tale for people. If you take the data today at face value, you're not doing fact checking. You end up in the news for a variety of different reasons. Lots of people are citing legal arguments, for example, that never took place, right? Things like that.
So I did a lot of work 6, 7, 8 years ago in beginning to look at distributed ledger blockchain technology. And associated with blockchain are smart contracts. And to me, how one uses generative AI is kind of like a smart contract. There's some regulatory issues. There's if you're actually executing automatically based on, like with a smart contract, based on if this and this, then execute, then I'm agreeing, on this contract to purchase something or whatever, to buy some commodity. There's some risk associated with that, and it's the same thing with generative AI. We get to a point where there's a set of recommendations. There's, big part of AI is predictive analytics. We want to kind of figure out what's going to happen at some point in the future. But to be able to interpret that, to be able to contextualize that, I think is important for some period of time. One of the, and Barbara will talk about this a little bit, at Chrysalis, one of the challenges that artificial intelligence has is being able to explain how it reached the conclusion that it reached, explainable AI. And, there's a lot of work to be done to try to figure that out. So you can say, here's what you should do at a point in time, But depending on the decision, if it's a security area, the risk involved and so forth, you probably want to look into it a little bit more, at least based on where it is right now.
I think it's a fascinating space. I think
Yeah.
it keeps changing. So trying to keep up with it is almost a little bit of a fool's errand, but I have on record on this podcast of being very bullish of how AI is going to impact the identity space specifically. You mentioned earlier and kind of teased some of the names that are speaking at the conference, and you have these concepts of legends panels, right? So you've got an identity legend panel, you've got a security legends panel, with some, I'll be honest, some really good gets, as we say in the business, right, for speakers. I guess my question is, one, who decides who the legends are? And then two, tell me a little bit about these panels, the identity legends, the security legends panels. Like, what's the point of those conversations, and what are you expecting for people to get out of those?
So the decision is made first by me and our analyst team, and I think if you look at some of the names and kind of their histories, I mean, there's lots of legends out there, but it would be hard to argue that any of the ones that are on either the identity or security legends panel shouldn't be there. So on the identity panel, and I don't necessarily consider myself a legend, but I'll kind of choreograph it. And we've had some amazing people. We've had Jamie Lewis and Kim Cameron, a lot of folks on past legends panels, but it gets back to the core premise that there's a lot of information out there, but if you're making a decision, certainly in the security and risk side, that could cost your organization everything if there's a major breach or if there's some problem. On the identity side, it certainly could lead to major problems or major opportunities if you do it correctly. You want to have the best in the industry for these recommendations. So, for example, on the Identity Legends panel, we have Andre Durand, who has been in this space. He's a little younger than me, but almost as long as I have. Built up Ping Identity, did a conference called Digital ID World before that, did Identiverse. He's been in the middle of this space. And, from my perspective, Andre's one of the good guys. He wants to do the right things for the industry. He wants to build companies and do all the things business people do. But he really gets it. We have Eve Mailer, who, was CTO for years at ForgeRock. She's been in the middle of this space. She, she was with Forrester before that. She, from an analyst perspective, from an understanding of identity, from a user-centric perspective, is an absolute superstar. We have Lori Robinson, who runs identity at Salesforce.com now. Lori has been in the middle of this space. I had the pleasure to work with her at Burton Group over the years. She's one of the top thought leaders at Gartner and now actually driving things at Salesforce. Kevin Kampman, who's part of TechVision. Kevin was with us from the early days at Burton Group. And he is probably, if you want to find the top IGA person in the world, Kevin has covered that forever. We have Martin Kuppinger. And Martin has, he's built, I believe, the premier research firm that focuses on identity and security and governance in Europe over the years. Built, some fantastic conferences, and is one of the thought leaders, in our industry. So, that's on the identity side. Do you want me to talk about the Security Legends panel as well?
Yeah, please.
In this area, we've been extremely fortunate. Again, we have on this panel several current and past Chief Information Security Officers. And they're making a lot of the hard decisions. I'll start with Malcolm Harkins, Malcolm was the longtime Chief Information Security Officer at Intel, really before being a CISO was even a thing, and really led them over the years. A great speaker, a great thinker in this area. We have Alex Toshev, who's the Chief Information Security Officer at VMware, and well known in our industry, not only for what he's done at VMware, but a lot of the Silicon Valley companies he's helped and driven over the years. We have Steve Roberts, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at Honda. And Steve actually spoke with us last year as well and did a fantastic job. We have Fred Cohen, who is probably the deepest thinker that I've ever dealt with in the cybersecurity space. You also don't know exactly what he's going to say, which makes it a lot of fun and makes it very entertaining. But to give you a sense for Fred, and he's worked with me at Burton Group years ago, but Fred, in his doctoral thesis back in the early 80s, was the first one to develop the concept of computer viruses, and he correlated computer viruses with biological, developed a lot of the early remediation, software and so forth. And then Diana Kelly, who most people know, she was also with us at Burton Group, a great analyst. She was a security leader at IBM and Microsoft, and now she's working with Protect AI, focused in some of the areas that we've been talking about. So, I know from my perspective, if I'm going to go to an event and I'm going to spend my time and I'm going to listen to people, I want to listen to people who have that level of credibility. And when they say something, I'm really going to listen and get something out of it.
Sounds like Chrysalis is going to be a fantastic conference. I hope all of our listeners get a chance to attend. Again,
use that discount code.
Yep. Discount code. Yeah, we got to push that out there one more time.
It'll be in our show notes.
IDAC 24. Yeah, it'll be in the show notes. So what do you have, Gary, planned beyond the conference?
What we want to do is take a lot of what we're discussing at the conference, and we were very intentional wanting to have it right at the beginning of the year, because I think this can represent a great planning foundation for large enterprises, but that will then drive our research theme for the year. So, we'll continue to expand upon these topics, build upon it. A lot of coverage, of course, on generative AI and artificial intelligence and its impact in these areas. Kevin Kampman and I are about 85% of the way done with what should be a great document on identity, governance, and administration. And we just concluded, a big consulting project on that. That's an important part of our research and our conference is, to do a lot of the hands-on work, to be, at client environments that are trying to figure these things out. You get kind of a pragmatic perspective that's difficult to get just, pulling information together and doing research. So, one of the things Kevin talks a lot about, which I find interesting and we'll expand upon in our IGA document and probably some additional work this year, is the human element. And the fact that when we look at IGA, of course, there are vendors that have IGA products, and we think about it as a product, but it's a process. And it needs to fit into, if you think about digital and where it has gone over the years, one of the biggest challenges is how do we govern this? How do we manage it? And it's not just on the identity side, it's what Kevin will call big G, big governance. How do we instantiate policies? How do we ensure that those policies make their way through the identity systems and the security systems and so on? We'll continue to do a lot of focus on the research. We just published our document on the future of identity management, but we have a top 12 list there of areas that enterprises, at least in our opinion, should look to invest in, and we kind of prioritize those, starting with governance, going to this consolidated platform, to AI and machine learning, and figuring out how to leverage that better, integrating some of these capabilities and so forth. So we'll continue to push out the research agenda, push out our consulting, but stay focused on this next generation of identity, security, and governance, and how enterprises should be dealing with this. As you've pointed out, given the change we have, and it's not just in generative AI, just the change that we have throughout, handling the scale that we need to handle now, handling increased regulatory controls and privacy controls and so forth. Lots and lots of challenges out there, which I think will keep us busy for the next year.
I like this idea of what I'm going to call working media, right? I mean, you've got your firm, you're doing this research stuff like that, but you also do the consulting. And Jim and I have this podcast, and we also do the consulting, right? We're not theoretical scientists when it comes to identity. We're very much in the weeds with each of our customers, learning from them. What are the challenges that are being faced in the real world? Which, to be honest, I find that refreshing personally, because I'm not in an ivory tower dealing with, well, this is the way it should be. And in the real world, that's not the way it works, right? The real world's messy. There's politics, there's budgets, there's this old app that we've tried to get rid of for 20 years that is never going anywhere. And so you got to plan around that. So I really enjoy those kind of conversations. And I love it when people bring sort of the real life right into the conversation as well. It's kind of what you referenced before.
Yeah, we're definitely of like minds there. I think it is, in the end, enterprises need to build these things, architect them, and deploy them. And, it's not just speeds and feeds. It's, what works, how do you deploy it, how do you integrate it, and how does that tie in with your business? Because in the end, a couple of years ago when Eve Mailer was on an earlier Identity Legends panel, one of the things, she highlighted, which has kind of stuck with me, is, like us folks that look at identity, we think that this is, a really big thing. But if you're running a business, it's not like, you really care about that. You care about, how quickly a customer gets engaged. You care about how you provision the right services to the right customers. You care about the security side. But the kind of integration of the kind of practical business side with the technology helps us probably stay focused really on the right thing, which is how's your business going to be successful. And these are all enabling technologies to hopefully improve that bottom line, your customer relationships, retention, and all of those good things.
I like that comment you made about what Eve said, right? The business doesn't necessarily care how things are getting done. As long as they're getting done, the risk is low, right? All those good stuff. I think that's probably good feedback for everybody. Everyone thinks there's the most important thing in the world. No, this is a lesson I learned serving waiting tables way back when. Your ranch dressing maybe isn't the most important thing in the world right now. So we'll get to it when we get to it. Gary, you've been really generous with your time, and I want to start to wrap things up, but it wouldn't be an episode if we didn't end on a lighter note. And I'm going to make this one a little bit holiday themed, because I think for the most part, I know you've been busy towards the end of the year, and a lot of people were like an end of year rush, but hopefully people had some time to kind of decompress and take some time off. And typically around the holidays, there's probably some good meals that are taking place, either family or other things. What's the best thing that you ate over this most recent holiday break?
Well, the best thing I ate was something I cooked, I must say. And it was and we had a traditional turkey and so forth, but especially with my kids who really love seafood, I made a pasta primavera with shrimp, lobster, and crab meat, and that was a big hit, and I must say I enjoyed it.
That's a pretty good rollout there for sure. Jim, what did you have that was memorable for food over the break?
Yeah, and my item was something I cooked also. It was the first time cooking it. It was a prime rib. I took a 5-pound prime rib and roasted it, and turned out great. Now, the funny thing was, our friend of the show, Arturo, texted me. He was doing the same thing, but on New Year's. I said, hey, man, I've got the perfect thing, 23 minutes at 350 per pound, 23 minutes per pound. And he wrote me back later, overcooked. I was like, man, I ruined the guy's prime rib. But I don't like my meat to be bleeding out and stuff like that. So it was primo. It was wonderful. What about you, Jeff?
Honestly, I had a few things, and so I'm selfish, and I came up with this question. I was like, I ate good over the break. My wife is a very good chef, and so she made a bunch of things. We had prime rib for Christmas Eve dinner. That was fantastic. We did a ham, but it wouldn't be me saying something if it wasn't something that wasn't good for you. As a Christmas present, my wife got me the Ninja, it's like an ice cream blender thing. I can't remember what it's called. Basically, you can make your own blizzards if you're familiar with Dairy Queen, and you drop your ice cream in. You can make ice cream in it, but you drop your mix-ins, and it does the whole thing where it mixes them together. And I gotta tell you, we're not sponsored by Ninja, but I would happily be sponsored by Ninja to talk about this thing all day long, because I have been eating ice cream like every day for like the last week. So I ordered a Peloton today to replace my old one. But that was by far was like the coolest thing, was making your own like blizzards at home, and it comes out chef's kiss.
I might have to buy one of those.
Yeah, me too. I just got a Ninja air fryer.
Air fryers are the best thing ever. That means you can bring fries home and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I've only done a few things. I just got it a couple weeks ago, but yeah, the early results are very good.
Yep. You can drop the McDonald's fries in, and you put it for about 350 or so for about 4 minutes. Crisp them right up. Tell you, man, we're living good. So we're talking ice cream, we're talking fried foods. Yeah, and I ordered a Peloton rower today. So that's me getting hopefully into better shape for 2024. That's a good spot where I think we'll leave it for this week. Gary, thank you so much for taking the time with us. Really looking forward to the Chrysalis conference. For those who haven't registered yet, use our code IDAC24. That'll be in our show notes as well. Take advantage of that. And thank you to Gary for that partnership and providing that for all of our great listeners out there. And we'll have links in our show notes to Gary if you want to ask him questions on LinkedIn, to the Chrysalis event itself, so people can check out the agenda and stuff like that and register. As well as there's a report that I think you guys are coming up with, or maybe it's already out, the future of identity management. It's sort of like the next 5 years in 30 to 60 seconds. Give us what is that report about?
So that report is one that we've done each of the past 6 years. And we put together a prioritized list of the areas that enterprises should be thinking about architecting and investing in. So first I had a top 10 list, now we have a top 12 list. It ties into some of the macro trends that we talked about earlier, but it's a way that enterprises can basically say, as we're thinking about our identity program this year, here's kind of a third-party assessment of some of the things we need to be thinking about.
And so we'll have a link to that in our show notes so people can check that out as well. I love thinking about the future, so I'm curious to see what's going to come up out of this. For me, it's okay, what should I be thinking about and what should I not care about? Because I have enough things to think about. Anything that whittles down what I need to keep in my brain, I'm always a fan of. So hopefully there'll be some good nuggets coming out of that. You can find us on the web, idacpodcast.com. Don't forget to use that voicemail button. Start sending those voicemails in, and lucky lucky winners that we'll use on the show for voicemails will get a copy of the book that we'll be announcing as well. So that's from Phil Windley. Jim, what's the name of that book again?
Learning Digital Identity.
Yeah, you are a super
Everybody,
fanboy.
what everybody who listens to this podcast probably wants to do.
Well, kind of a teaser for the next episode. Phil comes on the show and Jim's holding up his book. Like, look at me. I've read your book.
It's a heavy book, man. If you read a book that big, you'd be proud of yourself, too.
Yeah, I'm not a reader. I'll wait for the movie. How about that?
I don't think it'll be a mass market kind of thing.
Hey, you never know. Like this podcast, right? We still continue to grow. You never know. Maybe there'll be an IAM movie at some point. All right. On the web, idacpodcast.com, on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it this year, IDAC Podcast. Mastodon at IDAC Podcast at infosec.exchange. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn as well. Check out our show notes and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep sharing the gospel of Identity at the Center with others. So appreciate everyone for listening, and we'll talk with everyone in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com and find us on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. See you next time on Identity at the Center.